Nothing good here. My understanding is we've abandoned the Syrian Kurds, Rojava, as the more militantly Islamic factions within the new Syrian government push them back. Apparently there was a ceasefire a couple days ago. I'm not surprised America abandoned them. I mean, why would we not, I guess, given this government? Trump abandoned them last time too? Yep. Yes, sir.
A historic milestone. That's the declaration from the U.S. Middle East envoy after the Syrian government and Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces agreed a comprehensive ceasefire deal. The agreement will see a phased integration of SDF fighters and institutions into the Syrian state. The SDF says it also includes the withdrawal of government forces from the front lines and the entry of security.
Hey, Comrade Robin Hood, do you have a preferred video source you'd like me to look at?
Forces affiliated with the Interior Ministry into the city centres of Kurdish-majority Hasaka and Qamishli. Now, this is what the U.S. envoy to Syria, Tom Barrack, has posted on X. He says, today's announcement of the comprehensive agreement between the Syrian government and the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, represents a profound and historic milestone in Syria's journey towards national reconciliation, unity and enduring stability. This carefully negotiated step, building on earlier frameworks and recent efforts to de-escalate tensions, reflects a shared commitment to inclusion, mutual respect, and the collective dignity of all Syrian communities. Zain Basravia is joining us live now from the Syrian city of Aleppo. So just talk us through what's been announced, Zain.
Well, it's been a couple of hours and we're beginning to see details, and crucially, let's get right into what the Syrian government and the SDF are getting out of this deal. The Syrian government issuing a statement on state TV saying that it will take control. The Syrian state assumes control of all civil and government institutions, crossings and entry points.
How much open violence was there? So there's a ceasefire now. People in chat were telling me that Rojava was like gone. Basically, how bad did it get?
And no part of the country remains outside of its authority. This is something that Damascus had been pushing for with the SDF for some time, that it needs to be the centralized government authority governing Syria from the capital, Damascus, with no talk of autonomy, with no talk of separatism, with no talk of autonomous regions that are operating independently of the centralized government in Damascus. That seems to be the expectation, and crucially, both sides, the SDF and the Syrian government, have issued statements that do say the same thing. So there does appear to be an agreement. The quiet of the last 72 hours with no confrontations between the two sides clearly used to carry out conversations that have resulted in what many are seeing here as a positive result. If both sides managed to keep their guns silent.
There were huge battles because the Arab tribes that held the border with Jelani's government flipped sides. Zateo has a good explainer on the situation. Please, I love Zateo. 17 minutes. Disturbing.
This was the map of Syria when the Assad family took over in 1970. And this is how they left it. Pockets of a country controlled by minorities and opposition groups. In December of 2024, Bashar al-Assad fled to Russia, and Abu Muhammad al-Julani marched into Damascus.
They're getting absorbed by the Syrian government. Okay, obviously, I am always pro-Rojava, certainly more than I am pro-Julani. However, obviously, they would want a united Syria, right? Like, unless they were willing to literally allow Rojava to secede, this was always going to come to a head eventually. It's mostly just a matter of how violently it happened.
After 54 years of dictatorship, Syrians were finally free. They dared to dream their country could be whole again. A year later, the reality is mixed. A fragile Syrian state has made many advances, but is now facing growing division and hostility.
الطائف الكرسي في سوريا تطلب الاستقلال المنطقة الجنوبية. ما عاد في مجال غير.
So what role has Syria's new leadership played in this? Let's go back to the divided Syria.
Yeah, but ain't no way this should happen under an Al-Qaeda occupied government. Okay, listen, Jelani's obviously overseeing a lot of bad stuff here, but I don't think we should smear him for that necessarily. It seems like he is interested in actually building out a serious Syrian state. The issue is that a bunch of the military power in Syria is basically just Arab religious tribalism, you know? Like the only apart from Giuliani and the people trying to like directly secede or follow after Assad, you have Rojava, you have the Kurds, but there are like tons and tons of these like militant Arab groups who didn't want to work with the Kurds to begin with, and now they see an opportunity to kind of unite against them. Yes, the centralized authority is pretty fragile. I know that much.
Under the Assad regime. Following the Arab Spring, Syrians rose up against the dictatorship.
We're going to learn today.
Lasted over a decade. During this, Assad ruled over Damascus.
Dude, he's a terrorist. The designation of terrorist means nothing in the context of Syria. What? Like a terrorist against who? Against who? What? American occupiers? Against the Assad-backed Syrian government? It's a meaningless statement. He acts without the auspices of state power. Well, now he does, you know? What we're interested in is not whether or not he is a terrorist, but whether or not he's doing good for Syria. And right now, it looks like the country is in too fragile of a position to meaningly develop out, right? Like what we're looking to see is like, can he actually turn this into a real functioning state? And I don't know. The Kurds could.
Outside the capital, some parts of Syria were governed by different groups.
If they were allowed to.
In the northeast, the Kurds were the first to gain their autonomy and formed SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces. The Turkish-backed local forces took over the far north. The northwest was taken by opposition groups and rebels led by Giuliani. And in recent years, the Druze defied Assad and secured the semi-autonomy in the south.
Like, that's its own fucking problem, too, with the Druze, you know?
This divide lasted for years. But in 2024, something changed.
It was a moment full of hope that this change took a lot of people's lives, unfortunately, to happen. It destroyed the nation to happen, getting Assad out of power, and seeing him running out of the country after he basically couldn't defend himself.
Throughout the war, Assad leaned on Russia and Iran to keep him in power. But just before Assad fled, they pulled their forces, and HTS started marching to Damascus, taking it with almost no bloodshed. They were led by the ex-Al-Qaeda leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani.
Our boy.
Who dropped his assumed name, the one that was on the designated terrorist list, and returned to his birth name, Ahmad al-Shara.
I should probably call him that, but Giuliani just kind of stuck in my head.
The former Al-Qaeda affiliated leader was now a statesman seeking recognition on the world stage.
أحدثكم اليوم لا كحاكم بل كخادم لوطننا الجريح ساعيا بكل ما أوتيت من قوة وإرادة لتحقيق وحدة سوريا ونهضتها.
Al-Shara promised to serve a broken nation, and Syrians believed this new leadership might succeed. Perhaps the invisible borders would start to come down. But less than 4 months later, cracks began to show.
Oh no.
The first real test to Shara's leadership was bringing justice.
When a community or society faces severe human rights violations, you cannot deal with the past by just flipping the page. You get a lot of grievances, you get a lot of people missing, a lot of people want their rights back. And if you don't deal with that properly, those victims will become the new perpetrators because they're going to try to get their rights by their
No matter what you think of Giuliani's intentions, his army and a lot of his legitimacy comes from Islamists in his rank, and so far he has not restrained them at all, basically. Yeah, it seems like it's pretty... The most reasonable assumption you could make is that Ahmad would prefer it if we could get to nation building, but he's having a really tough time reining in the demographic grievances of the Islamists who make up the majority of his military power. And if he speaks out against them, he's worried about getting deposed himself. And then you would have another, like, you would have another Afghanistan, basically.
While Assad himself fled, the people who carried out his commands were still in the country, and Syrians wanted those perpetrators held accountable. The Assad family had built a system of deep loyalty. To do that, they mostly relied on the Alawite minority, an ethno-religious group that they belonged to.
while the military, of course, had a lot of Sunnis, they're 70% of the nation, naturally will have a lot of them in the military and in the intelligence. Kind of leading positions and more important decision-making was more handed to Alawi officers who are more loyal to Hafiz al-Assad and to his son Bashar later.
Many Alawites in the country are still poor and did not benefit from the government's favoritism, but they were heavily represented in the army, the intelligence agencies, and the inner circles of power. And favoritism got so pronounced that just speaking in an Alawite accent implied access to power in Syria. Assad also formed militias from the Alawite community to quell the uprising against him. These forces were known to be bloody and brutal, especially when facing protesters.
And this is at the very beginning stage when the revolution wasn't even armed. It was more peaceful protesters demanding things and the government shooting back at them. That created kind of grievances for the Sunni majority against the Alawis.
Where the new Shara government has failed is not delivering justice when it comes to Assad's prominent partners.
Get General Talal Makhlouf, a general in the military.
This happens literally every single fucking time. There's a military coup or a regime changes power, whatever else, you have the same problem. How the fuck do you deal with all of the people who are in nested positions of power and part of the old guard? If you replace all of them, you basically cripple your country and you cut off God only knows how many loose threads. You have no idea how many enemies you've just made spread out across all these institutions if you replace everyone with the new people in charge. Slow replacement? Yeah, but like, unfortunately, you have to think, as soon as you put a new guy in charge, every single person, every new key into power, every person associated with the old regime, they're waiting for you to do it to them too. And they're going to start building preparations. They're going to start building contingencies. They're going to say, hey, you know, I'm hiding money here. I'm hiding trust here. I'm making all these confidential agreements. Like it becomes really, really, really difficult to uproot these people, you know?
Special forces, Assad's cousin, he was leading Division 2 when the chemical weapons were deployed against...
The U.S. removing every single Ba'athist government official at once, collapsed the Iraqi government's day-to-day operation and created ISIS? Yeah. Can't really do that.
Damascus suburb. The guy is full of blood and he's in his home because there's a deal struck between Shara and certain regional powers, likely Turkey and Russia.
تعاملت الهيئة معنا باحترام شديد ولطف شديد، عن جد بتدل على أنهم يفكروا بمنطق الدولة.
The new government also struck a deal with Fadi.
Soviet Union did it. The Soviet Union did it. But I think that in order to get that kind of Soviet outcome, like a complete demolition of the Tsarist regime, you would need an amount of bloodshed that is both unfeasible and also cannot be sustained with the fractured coalition that Jolani represents, you know? Like, at least in the Soviet Union, there was a very, very, very clear line. There wasn't a lot of, like, ambiguous loyalty or mixed obligations when it came to the, you know, red versus white or the Bolsheviks when they overtook the palace. It was pretty clear who represented what. And that was before social media. You know, you're dealing largely with peasants, not even with proletariat. So maybe these systems are a lot less complicated.
Saqr, the leader of a brutal Assad loyalist militia.
Bureaucracies used to be a lot less complicated, okay?
The guy who formed what's called the National Defense Forces, a paramilitia group helping the government, and who did nasty crimes, including the Tadamun famous massacre.
Fadi Saqr's militia was responsible for the brutal Tadamun massacre, the horrific mass killing that took place in 2013, when the militia forced victims to jump into a mass grave while being filmed on camera.
I cannot sleep at night because of this guy. Because this is really personal now. All those people committed all these horrifying crimes we worked to document for 14 years. Now, not only living a peaceful life in his village or in his town, no. He is in the national peace building of the state.
But the government has also exercised brutal tactics from the Assad era on Alawite communities.
So what do you think the play is here, boys? Like very, very, very public show executions of a couple of the most vile Alawite repressors during the Assad regime, and then this is like a warning to the rest, like toe the line and you won't be next, and then you hope that's enough to pacify the people who are upset. You just use some of them as a scapegoat.
March 6, 2025, the government said that 200 security forces were killed in a coup attempt, driven largely by Alawite Assad loyalists. The response was swift and brutal.
كان في قديم الزمان مدينة هنا اسمها جبلة امتحن سلة صارت صحراء حرقوها حرق
تطهير عرفي تطهير عرفي.
The new defense ministry called on all newly joined factions to mobilize.
الآن وزارة الدفاع تنحر الرافضة والنصيرية وفلول النظام المجرم.
Some mosques across Syria issued calls to fight. For 4 days, at least a dozen militias, including foreign fighters, who previously came to Syria to join ISIS and al-Nusra, were deployed to Alawite majority cities along the Syrian coast.
Can we invent an Arab militia that is not Islamist? Can we do that? It'd be so much more simple if these guys weren't all insane religious extremists. Like, it's literally just different branches of the Kurds. Oh, fuck, you're right, we had them. Well, they're not Arab, but, you know.
For people who did not see any accountability process for those officials who committed violations against them and their loved ones, yeah, they will hold the Alawi community accountable at large, collectively. And that's wrong, clearly.
For example, Bolsheviks did similar things like this, the Civil War, doing mass cleansing and abuses of ethnic groups like Tatars and Cossacks. Man, it is such a testament to how fucking, like, developed and civilized America is, relatively speaking, that when we talk about all of these political grievances we have with groups of people, no one really frames it as part of an ethnic conflict. Not on our side, at least, I should say. Like, when you have all, like, oh, everyone, all these, you know, Russian people or Cuban expats or whatever, you never really see pogroms against those groups. Well, the right keeps trying to do this, but even they half-heartedly commit to it. There's not really a big pogrom taking place against Somalis or Haitians or whatever, as much as they would like one to. But over in Syria, it's like, I don't know, 80% of the guys who killed my dad's cousins were from this ethnic group, this, like, microscopic sub-ethnic community in Syria. So we have to kill all of them. I'm joining ISIS. I'm joining ISIS because the Jolani isn't killing them fast enough. Allahu Akbar, let's go.
But that's the mentality of the people. The Alawis governed us for 54 years. The Alawis killed us. The statement, of course, wrong in the sense if it was a system of abuse and everybody contributed.
Mass killings and atrocities were filmed and posted to social media moments after being committed.
This crap goes back generations. I mean, a lot of these places are still basically borderline tribal. Saudi Arabia is still, like, in many places in the Middle East and in Africa outside of the big cities, they still have, like, honest to God, legitimate tribal beefs, you know? They haven't had much time to not have those. They need to have, I don't know, sports rivalries or something civilized. It's fucking crazy. Mind you, this is all our fault, okay? They could have gotten out of this centuries ago if it wasn't for our meddling.
Syrians watched horrific video after video of Alawite men being forced to howl and crawl before being murdered.
These ethnic divisions are more destructive than any economic exploitation could be. False juxtaposition. White Europeans had these ethnic divisions for literal millennia. We just industrialized and developed to a point where we rebuilt our consciousness around nationalism, or at the very least, like, more petty city rivalries, you know. This is just a consequence of it. Like, one caused the other. Economic deprivation causes the maintaining of a social structure that prioritizes a tribal, like, mindset, basically.
Shara's forces even picked a page from the Assad playbook and dropped barrel bombs from the sky. 1,400 were killed across 4 days, mostly Alawites.
الله لا يسامحك انك لك والله لندعس على كل علوي اعطيناكم الامان لكن غدرتوا فينا انتوا فشرتوا اولادك هذولي يلا استلمي اولادك.
Part of the filming is also how proud they are to kind of seek revenge and get revenge.
Yeah, people make fun of like tribal divisions in Africa and the Middle East, but that what do you think the fucking fall of Yugoslavia was? You know? What do you think Kosovo was? Like this shit, it happened just a couple of decades ago on our doorstep, essentially. You need a relatively stable economic system to keep people from falling into these divisions, right? You know, normally, ideally, you have like sort of a nationalist cohesion, but past a certain point, globalization kind of erodes that too. A lot of Americans aren't really like that caught up in the identity of America versus Canada, and their identities become more of a cosmetic feature of their life rather than this like allegiance they owe. You know? Wasn't Yugoslavia pretty stable under Tito? Sure, but they were still basically just different tribes, right? I mean, he held together like a multi-ethnic country, but as soon as he died, it kind of fell apart. So the underlying rivalry hasn't really been addressed.
From the Alawi community. And of course, that established now a new grievances for the Alawis. They are the victim of a Sunni attack or a Sunni regime on us. That's why this cycle of violence will not be broken or stopped unless you have proper accountability process in the country.
Sadly, online campaigns helped fuel hate as well, and some loyalists of the new government voiced support for the vengeful campaign against the Alawites at large.
I mean, isn't this one advantage of globalism? Yeah, 100%. Look, one of the big things that ended tribalism as we see it here in the West was industrialization. You know why? Because everyone had to move into the cities. Like, tribes are what sustain tribalism, literally. Like separate, ethnically homogenous communities, small ones, usually rural. When everyone has to go to the city to get a job, like being fed into a big mill or whatever, you know, everyone has to go spend some time having their fingers mangled in a press. Those ethnic divisions tend to kind of melt away. Look at America. Irish, Italian, Jewish, a lot of these communities started off as distinct ethnic subgroups that had their own communities in New York, but like nowadays we're just like, well, they're New Yorkers. Are they originally Puerto Rican, Dominican, Irish, Jewish, you know, whatever? Yeah, sure, but like that's not the prevailing identity, and people also for the most part aren't out there forming street gangs to defend themselves over it. Back in the 50s, people were still doing like West Side Story shit, right? But nowadays, like, you know, people aren't really forming gangs in New York to defend the ethnicity of their neighborhood. If gangs do form, they might be ethnically aligned, but they're usually because of some underlying economic problems, right? You get me. Basically, what I'm saying is that you need a certain level of industrialization or economic centralization to incentivize people of different communities to mix together, and that then tends to like destroy, you know, the tribalistic, you know, the tribal conflicts. You do need a certain amount of gabagool. Liberalism wins again? Unironically. Yeah, 100%. Oh, and by the way, it's the same in Syria as it ever was everywhere else, okay? In Syria, these big ethnic rivalries, these like huge tribal divisions, are not stemming from the cities. Guarantee you. For the most part, the people in the cities are victims of disproportionately rural, tribal, ethnic communities that are militarizing to fight over one another. Because the cities are multicultural. Yeah, Damascus, comparatively... I can't talk, I'm sorry, I'm trying my best. You know what I'm saying, though, here. The guys in Damascus are like, come on, can't we all sit down, have a kebab, and talk it out? Meanwhile, there are like 17 flavors of ISIS insurgent mobilizing out there in the desert because all of them heard something about how the cousin of the other guy knew somebody who was responsible for the killing of their great-grandfather, and justice needs to be done. Roids everywhere are a blight? Yep.
في دمهم هن وبالساحل البحر قريب عليكم نعم مستغنين عن البحر شوفوهم في البحر وين كنتوا بيوتنا راحت وين كنتوا انتوا بيوتكم ما راحت بس خطف كم واحد منكم كنتم طلعتوا تدافعونا على شو
Anybody disagree with the government, you get an army of trolls and bots sitting to dehumanize them, to attack them.
I've seen people posit that the deal to integrate Kurdish SDF into the Syrian military is an attempt by al-Sharaa to create a counterbalance to the Islamist militia. Wait, are they doing that? That's huge. Wait, that's actually really, really good. If the SDF is being integrated into the Syrian military, they're going to be a counterbalance to the Islamicization. Like that means that the military isn't going to be made up entirely of like ISIS freaks. Integrating all military and security elements of the SDF and the structures of the SDF and interior and spacious, conducting a security letting, grant the military ranks corresponding financial and logistical entitlements, and protecting the autonomy of the Kurdish regions. That actually sounds pretty okay. They don't retain their units or commanders? Well, no. If the military is being integrated, they wouldn't want to keep the same units and commanders. If they did that, it would basically be like a second parallel military. How many of them are there? 50 to 100,000? Okay, and how many in the broader Syrian military? This is a numbers game. Significantly restructured, having recruited about half of a planned 200,000 strong force. Holy shit. There might actually be more people in the SDF right now than there are in the formal Syrian Arab army. That's actually huge. If they can maintain the incorporation of the SDF, and the SDF is willing to stand for their, oh fuck, man, this is really, really, really risky. You guys know that? Like, Kurds are not widely loved by Arabs in Syria. They're going to be like harassed. They're going to be bullied. They're going to be like hazed by the people around them. And how many of the SDF numbers might include Arabs that defected? Oh, 100% sure, but I hope they would still maintain some degree of loyalty. Not loyalty, but like, I hope an Arab who served under the Kurds would not then immediately go like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fucking beat a Kurd in the barracks to death tonight, like right after. Wonder how misogyny will play out. Yeah, fuck, what are they gonna do about the female Kurds in the SDF? What are they gonna do about Turkey? Because Turkey's been taking free shots at Rojava for a while now. What happens when they're incorporated into the Syrian militia? This is one hell of a gambit. Yeah, this is actually like really spooky. This is really spooky, but I feel like it's also the only thing they could do, right? I feel like this is the only play. What else could you do? If you want one Syria, you have to incorporate the SDF. There is no way you can legitimately advocate for like a Syrian state while a parallel military controls half the country. A parallel military run by an ethnic community that most Syrians don't like. But if you incorporate them, you could legitimize them. But you could also just like fold them in. I don't know, man. I don't have much hope for an independent Kurdistan, but it would just be nice if the Kurds weren't all killed or kicked out of Syria. Turkey still controls half of Jelani's army. The entire SNA joined and retained all their structures. It's them that's also done most of the war crimes. Well, hopefully the incorporation of the SDF is an indication to those people that they should reassess their loyalties. They're not like diehard supporters of Turkey or whatever. You know, like Turkey has influence over the SNA, but I like they could still. I don't know. That's pretty scary. I don't know. This makes my tummy hurt, guys. No, but Turkey still pays their wages. Yeah, I just wonder. Do you think they could afford to pay out the SNA's wages if they were able to get the oil rigs up online, the ones that Rojava's been guarding? Like, if the SDF is folded into the army and they're able to start really bringing oil production online, do you think that would be enough for them to basically buy out the SNA? It would take years, though, and they would have to get, like, the West in. No, you couldn't do that. Turkey? Who would they even sell to? The SNA are mostly thugs. Do you think they have to get got? Like, do you think the only way forward for Syria is that these guys are... Only way is the SNA has to go? There are at least 25,000 of them. How the fuck do you get rid of that many guys? At least 80k? That's like as many as there are SNA. What an interesting problem. Basically the Israel treatment? I don't know, man. Interesting, more like nightmarish. A report by the investigators of the UN's International Independent Commission on Syria denounced the atrocities committed against Kurds by Syrian National Army forces, which include torture, rape, murder, systemic looting, hostage-taking, forced displacement, forced appropriation of civilian property, arbitrary detentions, kidnappings, indiscriminate shelling, rocket attacks, as well as killing and maiming, quote, scores of civilians through the use of IEDs. Okay, guys, here's the plan, all right? In the middle of the night, the entirety of the SNA wakes up early because they set their phone alarms for 3 a.m., and then they smother every SDF. Every SDF guy wakes up and smothers every SNA guy with a pillow in the barracks. 4D Chestmaster Jelani is going to move all the units around so there's exactly one SDF guy for every one SNA guy, so that there's a perfect ratio of smothering that can take place all at once. A sock with a bar of soap in it for every SDF fighter. Exactly. Shira has been very cooperative with the U.S. to get a more unified Syria. He can use the U.S. to pressure Turkey to drop the SNA. Man, I hope so. I wonder how all the former Assadist army forces fit into this. They're still part of the new army. Maybe if they're just keeping their heads down, they're like, please don't look at me. But does Israel want a unified Syria? No, no. Israel wants to selectively fund partisan military groups to pick apart Syria and weaken them so that Israel has an easy time assimilating more territory. Remember that Israel just randomly struck Damascus a bunch after the civil war, after Assad's ousting, and even took over land in their southwest. Israel will try to tear them apart as much as they can. An agreement has been reached of the settlement of civil and educational rights of the Kurdish people and guaranteeing the return of displaced their areas. The agreement is... Man, I'm really not trying to be naive, but I do think that Jolani wants good. I know that it's stupid and naive of me to believe that, but I really do think that he's making a good effort at trying to turn Syria into a real state. Like, as fucked up as things are over there, he's dealing with, like, every fucking flavor of Islamist insurgency, and every ethnic group hates every other ethnic group, but I do think he wants good, even if so far things have been trending bad, mostly. Integration of all civilian institutions in the Hasaka government into the Syrian governorate and Syrian institutions, administrative structures. No. He definitely interested in integration. He's a former Islamic terrorist. How the fuck could he want good? Dog, who cares? He worked with Al-Qaeda. Everyone's worked with Al-Qaeda. No one gives a shit, okay? It's all good. Adopting a list of nominated leaders submitted by the SDF leadership to fill military, security, and civilian positions in central state structure. I guess, like, the big question is, what rank will the Kurds be allowed to hold in the new integrated military? If they're in a separate, like in separate battalions or separate divisions or whatever, are they going to be ruled by Arabs or are they going to be ruled by Kurds? Because if they're ruled by Arabs, even if the forces are majority Kurd in some places, there's a lot of... Yeah, it says senior military positions, I know. I just want to know the details on that because it's possible they could still be directly under the thumb of somebody who will work to undermine them. Welcoming Presidential Decree number 13 of 2026, which stipulates the recognition of Kurdish cultural and linguistic rights and addresses unregistered legal and civil issues and restores property rights accumulated from previous decades. It's really good. Vosh, your logic kind of reeks of good Tsar, bad boyars. Well, the problem is the bad stuff we've seen done are literally from the boyars, and the good stuff we're seeing done is literally from the Tsar, right? Like, the boyars are the ones running around doing ethnic cleansings while Jolani, like, watches from the capital, and the good stuff coming out of Syria is from the capital, like this is the Tsar, not the boyar. It might actually be the case here. He's trying to, like, wrangle a bunch of violent tribal Islamists, you know? It's not good. It's really difficult. But why would he recognize Kurdish cultural, linguistic, and property rights if he wasn't at least somewhat interested in long-term stability? Like, if he wanted to just oversee the downfall of the Kurds, couldn't he just, you know, do it? Like, he could coordinate with Turkey, shell the fuck out of them, all the Arab groups within the SDF's territory turn on them like they were, and so on and so forth. Saddam made a similar deal before the Anfal genocide, keep in mind. Fair point. Well, we'll see. Let's finish the video. This has ended up being more interesting than I expected it to be. I do appreciate the opportunity to learn about this stuff. He's literally organizing 2 genocides right now. Dog, that's just not true. Listen, this is a really complicated situation. Jolani is not organizing 2 genocides. He was only able to take over the country by virtue of a big, diverse coalition of militant interests, many of which are full of Islamists and radicals and terrorists and people who have committed many war crimes. And the country is full of ethnic groups that hate the other ethnic groups in the country, and everyone's at each other's throats. And it looks like right now he is struggling to rein in the worst elements of that army. And I think it's fair to point that out. It's fair to criticize that. But I think that saying he's orchestrating 2 genocides is just dishonest. Like, if we are interested in long-term statecraft in Syria, we have to at least engage with the nuance here. Why is this guy defending a dictator? Genocide denial, you are reaching so far. What the fuck? Why are there so many Mossad agents in YouTube chat? What the hell? Of course he's a dictator. He's a military leader who just seized control of the Assad regime. What are you going to do? Turn that into a democracy day one? There's still, like, a bunch of factional warring. I also think you're coping. Can you tell me what you think I'm coping on? Do you not agree that, like, he was only able to take the country by virtue of working together with agents both internal and foreign, and now like he's having trouble reining in because a lot of them are extremely violent and tribal? Is that not what about that is inaccurate? I'm Assad's strongest soldier. Oh, okay, you're not Mossad agents. You're revanchists. You're waiting for Assad to return from Russia. I think people are confusing you understanding it's a complex situation with you thinking he's a good person. Dude, people are always like that with online politics, man. Oh, you can never, it's always like hard line against this or against that. There was never, ever, ever, ever going to be a clean resolution to the fucking Syrian civil war. What kind of insane, like, God himself would have to come down and resolve it to have a clean break on this one, you know? Or Allah himself. Like the idea that you would ever get an outcome here that wasn't going to be really fucking bloody and messy for years and years and years. You don't actually have to defend the Islamic dictator. Okay, are you a Mossad agent? Channel activity. Chat messages in the last year. This is the only thing you've talked to my chat about. You might actually be a Mossad agent.
Personal level, to dig for social media stories, make rumors about them. I get accused of being Assad remnants, fulul. I spent two prison terms with my entire family, and then I get the same stupid comments like, "Hey, you miss Bashar al-Assad clearly." Yeah, I miss being tortured by Bashar. This community of commentators managed, I think, by pro-government elements in Damascus, is leading that narrative and discourse about dehumanizing the others who are disagreeing with Damascus.
The revenge campaign against the Alawites carved a deep divide between the government and the minority that now lives in fear. Shara had a second major test to his leadership, creating a governing system that represents the country and its diverse minorities.
You would think a parliamentary system, after we dealt for 54 years with a sick centralized system with a person on the top knowing everything, approving everything, controlling everything, you'd expect some sort of parliamentary system or some representative system.
Shara's government adopted a temporary constitution that gave the president sweeping powers. Shara offered major cabinets to HTS figures and even placed his brothers in positions of power.
إذا حررت خطيفة أو مختطف من خاطفه فلا يمكن أن يسألك بعد ذلك إلى أين ستأخذني.
He excluded diverse voices from taking part in shaping the new Syria. He especially excluded the minorities with forces on the ground, like the Kurds and the Druze.
Shara individually decided on centralized system and a presidential system, and then he didn't give others any space to express their demands.
The Druze were reluctant to give up arms and integrate under Shara's rule. They had forced Assad out.
It's really tough, because on one hand, obviously he would seize power and centralize it, and obviously he would put loyal people in positions of power. The alternative is getting assassinated. That's always been... This happens literally every time there's a coup in every country, whether the person doing it is right or left wing, you know? There isn't really like a democratic civil society in Syria, so it's not like you can just pick up the pieces of an otherwise mostly functional bureaucracy and just like, you know, get rid of the bad people. The whole system was authoritarian, you know? There's always going to be like a stabilization point where you need time to like assume control. And I also kind of sympathize with him not wanting to give Druze representational leadership in his government, considering the fact that as an ethnic group, they're mostly interested in like seceding, basically. At least a lot of them are. But at the same time, I don't really know what else you could do. Like, what could you do to... So the Kurds can be reasoned with. What could you do to convince the Druze to integrate with the new government? To be fair to the Druze, we just saw those HTS fucks admit they want to massacre the Druze. Yeah, of course, in the party that they were having. I wonder what the timeline on that was. The death squads are killing a lot of them. It's a little bit more complicated than just they only were antagonistic to the government after the army that the government uses started killing them. Like, them seceding would not help the issue. It seems like a lot of them are being pretty antagonistic towards the government in general, but I don't really know how you would... The answer to this kind of thing is semi-autonomous regions. Yeah, but semi-autonomous regions based on ethnic groups is like a long-term recipe for disaster. You really don't want that in the long term. Ethnic diversity in Syria. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, man. Short-term autonomous regions. If in order to make this work, you need everybody here to believe in the value of a new government and working together in that government. Like, you need everybody on board with that project. It seems like the best thing that Sharad could have done would have been to publicly execute some of the more obviously bad Alawites. Maybe that would quell some of the more militant, like, ISIS wings in his country. And then maybe that would, like, pacify the Druze a bit. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking like that one guy on Twitter, how Hitler could have taken over Russia. Don't siege Stalingrad, just take it, or whatever. Just Zerg Russia. How many Alawites were killed? What scale were these massacres on? 2025 massacres of Syrian Alawites. Yeah, multiple reports, ranging from 1,000 to 2,000, but more arguing around 2,000. Man, that's a lot. Fuck, that's a lot of massacred people. How many of them? About 273 of them were security forces, and 259 were Alawite militants. Man, the fucked up thing is that I wouldn't even feel that bad about it if they were targeted actions against the militants. Like, many people within the Alawite ethnic group were thugs of the Assad regime. If they just, like, very targetedly found those people and executed them, it would be like, okay, that's messy, but it's also Syria, so, you know, the bloodletting is kind of part of establishing trust in the new government. But they killed a lot of civilians. It's so messy. It's so ugly. The only reason it wasn't way more was that Russia housed tens of thousands in their bases. Sorry, I'm just thinking. What about the Druze insurgency? There are just not that many of them, too. Only 3% of the population. At least the Alawites are like 11%. Okay, can we agree on one thing for sure? The Druze are doing the wrong thing here. Regardless of everything else that's happened, balking at secession, or like pushing for secession and playing into like foreign op stuff with Israel is not good, right? Like that's clearly not the right play here. No matter how bad things are, like Israel would let you all get slaughtered. They just want more infighting in Syria. I don't know how you deal with this. Do you just ignore them? Maybe the best thing to do would just be to completely ignore the Druze for a while, focus on everything else, and then hopefully if you can get your shit together, they have guns. That, well, obviously, if they move out of their territory and shoot you, you can kill them. But I mean, like, don't, like, just let them be here and then prove that you can build a better government yourself, you know? And maybe ideally over time, they're more willing to assimilate, maybe? But obviously, if they start marching out, like, you have to deal with them. There just aren't that many of them. Woo them by having a shining city in the dark. Yeah, I do believe that. I do believe that, yeah. The deal with the Kurds might be a test in that regard. Yeah. What if Israel gets them first? If Israel starts using them as a foothold, that is a real problem. I mean, they're kind of already doing that to an extent. Right here next to the Golan Heights, you know, Israel took that. What was the mountain that Israel took randomly during the Syrian civil war? Like, Israel took advantage of the chaos and they just took the Mount Hermon. Was it? Yeah, Hermon? Yeah. They just, like, they were like, yoink, took it for themselves.
And secured the semi-autonomous region for themselves. The new government, however, was eager to control their areas and quell any demand for autonomy or self-government.
Since the Sharia took power and Assad collapsed, the Druze kind of aimed for similar level of decentralization / self-autonomy where they can run their day-to-day activities.
In late April, just weeks after the massacres in Alawite cities, an audio message started circulating on social media. Muslims believed the message to be offensive to the Prophet Muhammad. Many began spreading the false claim that the voice in the message belonged to a Druze leader. The reaction was violent. Attacks on Druze students broke out at universities. Protesters marched the streets in multiple cities, some calling for punishment, others demanding extermination of the Druze. The government later claimed that Druze militias attacked a security checkpoint. It launched a retaliatory attack on the Druze towns of Sahnaya and Jaramana. Over 100 people were killed. Druze communities in Israel took to the streets, calling on the Israeli government to intervene. And Israel has never been quiet about its desire for a divided Syria. Israel launched airstrikes, it argued, to defend the Druze community. On May 2nd, an airstrike struck the vicinity of the presidential palace in Damascus. 3 months later, a local conflict between Druze and Bedouin tribes boiled over. Once again, Shah's government mobilized against the Druze.
تم تحرير مدينة السويداء من العصابات الخارجة عن القانون العصابات الإرهابية.
Government soldiers and Bedouin tribe fighters marched towards the city of Sueda, armed with razors. They filmed themselves reveling in shaving the mustaches of Druze men, who see facial hair as a symbol of dignity and pride.
To see the amount of electric razors the army was equipped with, this is...
God, religion is so fucking retarded. What was I saying? What was I going to say? How much of this how much of this, like, on what level was this ordered? What was the highest political or military authority that that ordered this this march into Druze territory?
This is not innocent. This is not a coincidence, and this is not an individual practice. Those guys were prepared to do this type of violations.
Once again, Syrians witnessed a campaign of humiliation and killing, apparently sanctioned by the government.
It was official army units doing that? No, I know that. But what I'm saying is, did Jolani call for it? Or was it like a general called for it? I'm interested in knowing, like, how high up the orders here go, you know? They say the government did it. Did the government do it? Yeah, of course. But I want to know, like, where that buck stops. He's so desperate to defend these actions, it's like hypnosis. Dog, what are you talking about? Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, what, like, pre-existing ethnic conflict did you survive that has motivated you to the degree of tribalism that it takes to think that I'm acting out of anything other than a desire to know more about the conflict here? Holy shit. Obviously, massacres can be ordered at many different levels. Sometimes, like, for instance, you know, is it being done at a company level? Is it individual units? Clearly not in this case. Is it a general ordering it? Is it Jolani, the president himself? That's what I want to know. I think it's interesting. Obviously, if Jolani is specifically ordering this stuff, then he's unsalvageable. That's unconscionable, you know? If it's a general directly beneath him, it's possible that the reason he's staying quiet in his opposition to it is because he thinks he would be couped, or he would lose the respect of his men to the extent that he would effectively stop being the president. Already, like, the real power centers in Syria are not him, but the generals, as is always the case with destabilized countries. So I'm interested in knowing, like, where does it center from? Knowing where it is centered from helps you understand how to address it. Is Vosh's take his silence as a form of acceptance apply here? Well, it depends on whether or not he thinks that it would lead to good outcomes in the long run, right? Like I said, you know, if he doesn't have much control over his men to begin with, openly beefing with a general is a great way for Jolani to lose whatever vestige of power he has. This is like military coup stuff 101. The people with the guns are the ones with power. If Jolani has, like, an open beef with his generals, it could lead to him losing everything, and then the country just turns into, like, marauding bands of, like, ISIS fighters, basically. If he wants to build a real country, he has to secure control over his men, and it looks like right now he has very poor control over his men. So I'm wondering, you know, what can be done about that.
One particular crime showed government soldiers forcing Druze men to jump off a balcony to their death. Druze leaders renewed their plea for international protection, and Israel, which had been working to weaken the new government, struck Syria again on July 16.
I remember that.
The Ministry of Defense in central Damascus, in one of the most aggressive Israeli bombings in Syria in recent years. Government forces withdrew from Sueda. More than 1,000 people were killed, most of them Druze. Druze militias later launched a revenge campaign against the Bedouins in southern Syria. Tens of thousands were displaced. And divisions deepened. Israel's intervention fueled hatred towards Druze among Shah's loyalists. And the Druze lost trust in the government. Syria's first year after Assad's fall was rocky, but not entirely without progress. Shah's government shut down Assad's prisons, including Sadnaya, ending the regime's machine of torture and disappearance. Shah concentrated his efforts towards lifting sanctions. He appeared to have succeeded.
I really don't know how possible this is, but it kind of seems like the Kurds or the SDF are al-Shara's last hope. Like, there are so few people in Syria with guns who are interested in building a country. Like, so the majority of the people in Syria who are militarized just want to take out their petty factional fucking tribal revenge on other groups. You know? The SDF is like the only other group of well-armed, well-coordinated, well-educated people who actually care about nation building. I wonder if the incorporation of the SDF could give al-Shara a little more leverage in the long run, you know? Like a little bit, like more allies in the government, even if not people high up, but like people in the rank and file who are SDF isn't only Kurds. No, but I would trust the Arabs who have served under the SDF more than I would trust Arabs that are aligned with like the current Syrian army, on average.
Successfully brought Syria back onto the international stage. But during this year, the new government revealed a pattern that is hard to ignore. Two brutal campaigns of mass killing against two minorities have already torn deep new wounds into Syria's social fabric. And as Shah gains more power, minorities are more skeptical to integrate under the state that he rules and hesitant to trust the direction their fragile country's headed.
That was some really good reporting, though. It didn't actually cover the stuff that we were talking about, the recent incorporation of the SDF.
Northeast Syria is changing hands and the map is shifting fast. For more than a decade, the Kurds here have governed themselves. But now they say they are under threat.
Clashes between government forces and Kurdish fighters are destabilizing the country and could derail Syria's fragile push towards lasting peace.
The only way for Shara to not be ousted upon trying to purge these generals is to basically have CIA or KGB or some superpowers intel that can help him purge them without a coup. Yeah, that makes sense. That is why Maduro had Cuban intelligence with him rather than Venezuelan intelligence. Yeah, that's probably like his best bet. If he could get Chinese intelligence to assist him in doing some more, like, I don't know, wet work, or I don't know what Russia could really do. I don't know what we would do.
Allahu Akbar. Under the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, the group that allied with the United States and the West to defeat ISIS, this has remained one of the last parts of Syria outside full government control. Where?
In Hasaka, Kurdish fighters on the front line told me they're preparing to defend this land and their communities, whatever the cost. And they feel betrayed by the United States, which is now shifting support to the Syrian government.
Despite all the betrayal we have faced from international forces, our stance has not changed. We remain armed and prepared to defend our land.
Since the beginning of the year, forces loyal to the interim government of President Ahmad al-Shara have pushed deep into the northeast, attacking Kurdish forces. Part of a campaign to reunify the country.
There is now a standoff between Syrian and Kurdish forces. Government troops are a few kilometers down this road. And the ceasefire that's in place is extremely fragile, and the fear is if it breaks down, it could lead to another civil war.
Government forces have already retaken cities that were captured by ISIS by the Kurds, including Raqqa, a predominantly Arab city. Here, there were celebrations when the Kurds retreated. And this is what happened when they took over the Al-Hol camp, a vast detention facility for ISIS families. We visited Al-Roj camp, still under Kurdish control, where many foreign women and children linked to ISIS members are detained, including Shamima Begum, who had her British citizenship revoked. Inside, women and children live in harsh, overcrowded conditions. Zilan, from Turkey, was just 12 when her parents joined the Islamic State. She's now 20.
When we were brought here, no one asked for our opinion. Whether we wanted to come or not, it was our parents' decision. I've been in this camp for almost 9 years. I worry about dying here. I can't see a way out.
Like thousands of others, she's been stuck in this camp for years, trapped in...
By the way, the reason they're stuck there is because half of them aren't even Syrian and their governments won't take them back. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fucked situation from the perspective of Rojava, because, like, their parents are dead. They died fighting Rojava. The SDF killed their ISIS fuckwit parents and left their kids there to die. And since then, Rojava has basically been like, well, fuck, I guess we're just taking care of these kids. Because they're women and children. They can't, like, fend for themselves. A lot of them aren't Syrian. You know, they're like Iraqi, but Iraq doesn't want to take them or whatever. So they're just saddled with them. And you know what? I'm sorry. Like, the fact that Rojava allows press to see them, I don't know. I mean, what the fuck? What do you do, right? I'm sure that they recruit from these ranks to an extent, but like also to an extent, like literally, what do you do? They're like stateless people. A lot of them are kids. There are no men because all the men are dead because they died fighting the SDF. Can't they be integrated into the population? I'm sure, like, to an extent, but I'm sure there are a lot of complications there as well.
Legal limbo, with no country willing to take her back.
Since the conflict erupted again, there are huge questions about what happens to the tens of thousands of ISIS prisoners and detainees in these sprawling camps in northeast Syria. The fear is
that... It's the problem, man. It's the problem if you don't have, like, a heavily developed civilization. It's that you don't actually have a way of dealing with these guys. Like, you don't... It's just how massacres happen. Oh, my God. And the fucking Syrian government's been freeing these people. And a lot of them are, like, regular women and kids who just can't reintegrate, or they think they can't reintegrate, or people want them dead or whatever. But sometimes they're prisoners. They have, like, men that were captured instead of killed.
But if security breaks down, there could be escapes, ISIS could regroup, and there could be renewed attacks, not just in this region, but also in the west.
The head of Al-Roj told me the mood inside the camp has become much darker.
By the way, the U.S. is sending as many male ISIS prisoners from Rojava's prisons to Iraq now. Am I horrible for thinking that, like, I don't know, man. You were part of ISIS. Taking care of prisoners is expensive. ISIS is really fucking bad, dude. They're really, really, really bad. It's insane how bad ISIS is. I don't know. These people don't have a lot of money, water, and food to go around. They're keeping prisoners alive? That's crazy.
Since government forces began their advance.
Since the new government took control of Damascus, there have been noticeable changes in the camp. Many women feel empowered and hopeful, believing ISIS is returning because like-minded forces have now come back to power.
Ooh, see, you've got all these women and children that you've been keeping for ages because they're stateless and no one wants them, and the Syrian government's moving in, and the kids are like, ISIS is coming back, ISIS is coming back. What the fuck do you do with that as a Kurd, man? That's fucking crazy. Jesus Christ.
The offensive is reshaping Syria's balance of power after the fall of the Assad dynasty, and the Kurds' semi-autonomous statelet is rapidly shrinking. When Syria descended into civil war during the so-called Arab Spring, the Kurds took control of parts of the northeast. Then, after playing a key role in defeating ISIS, they captured even more land, eventually controlling roughly 25% of the country by 2019. But since the interim government's offensive started in early January this year, they've lost swathes of territory. At stake is the vast majority of the country's oil and gas reserves, located in the northeast.
Yeah, by the way, these women aren't just helpless, innocent people. They've been radicalizing their kids for years. When Rojava started separating their kids, he radicalized them. The UN said that was a war crime. Yeah. We shouldn't infantilize them too much. Like, not... Historically, like, the wives of bad men have not all just been hapless victims. Like, ideologically, they're also part of this militant Islamist cult. You know, rebuild the caliphate, death, so on and so on. It like, being realistic here, unfortunately, it really does seem like the only things that you can do are an unimaginable crime or dedicate all of your society's resources to housing them forever until they grow old in prison. And neither of those seem correct.
Total government revenue for a country trying to get back on its feet. But the Kurds are a sizable military force with aspirations of statehood. Damascus is also demanding they integrate into the national army.
For people living in the Kurdish majority areas, this is a really worrying, really nervous time. And what these units are doing is they're driving through the town to try and offer people some reassurance.
The Kurds, a minority, say they need security guarantees and a degree of autonomy if they are to give up their weapons. In Kurdish-held areas, the new interim government, led by rebel forces, some with extremist links, is met with mistrust. On these streets, there's a deep unease about what this new chapter may bring.
So tens of thousands of Kurds have fled as the armies advanced. And there have been allegations of sectarian violence. Now, some of them have taken refuge in this mosque in Kamishli. And we're going to go in now and try and understand what they're running away from.
Shireen Abdul Fattah is terrified. She's sheltering here with her family, bracing for the possibility of war between the new authorities in Damascus and Kurdish forces.
We were afraid of airstrikes and of death. Children were being killed, women arrested and tortured. The new government is fundamentally terrorist in nature. In 2014, my hometown was attacked by Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. The man who was once a part of those groups is now the president of Syria, and nothing has changed for the Kurds. America says it protects us, yet it betrays us. We are treated like something to be sold or bought, while our children are killed before our eyes.
At night, armed militias guard the roads in the darkness. Across Kurdish areas, tensions are high as residents wait to see what comes next. A 15-day ceasefire to move ISIS prisoners to a more secure location in Iraq is already started.
It is, like, so fucked up and insane that there are a significant number of Syrian soldiers who are probably looking forward to the opportunity to break free those ISIS prisoners, so that they can, like, reestablish control in Syria. You know? Like, the release of tens of thousands of ISIS prisoners would be a massive, massive, massive morale, like, fire a flare into the air kind of signal that their time has come back. U.S. CENTCOM on that? U.S. forces launch mission in Syria to transfer ISIS detainees to Iraq. How many of them? Up to 7,000 ISIS detainees could be transferred from Syria to Iraqi controlled facilities. At least Iraq has, like, some money in prisons. Iraq is a functioning country more or less now? The various sectarian factions in Iraq also hate ISIS a lot more. Yeah, for now. We'll see what happens after Iran falls. We're gonna get ISIS too. Ah, no. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Isn't Iran far more stable and industrial? Yeah, but Iran has no reason at all to take on ISIS prisoners. They have no incentive to just randomly take so many people, hungry mouths. They're not our allies. Iraq at least nominally is. I feel like with the fall of the IRG, the leftovers wouldn't be anywhere near as bad or as capable of ISIS. You really think so? I don't know. If Iran, the last real beacon of Western opposition in the Middle East, fell, because there aren't any remaining, right? Like UAE, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, even fucking Assad was anti-Western in his own way, even if fucking Muslims hated him, right? With Iran, the final bastion of anti-Western Islamic power in the Middle East falling, I feel like people would lose their fucking minds. I think there are a lot of people across the Middle East, even people who don't necessarily like Iran, who see it as a necessary counterbalance to Western interference. I mean, certainly like tons of them in Iraq and Syria and so on. And if Iran fell, it would be pretty blackpilling for a lot of them. All right, well, anyway, this was all very depressing. I have no idea. Do you think it's justified for Western nations to strip ISIS fighters of citizenship? No, it's fucked up, because then we can't even take them back after they've been caught. Like, what we're basically saying is, oh, Kurds in Rojava, good luck. You kill them or you imprison them for the rest of their lives. You can't even send them back to the countries that they've had their citizenships stripped of. If if you are an ISIS fighter and the SDF captures you alive and you have no citizenship, and like you can't be returned to anywhere, and you are unrepentantly in line with the ISIS ideology, I don't really care what they do to you. This is just a natural consequence of minimal local resources. In the United States, we have money aplenty, we have prison cells, we can provide for people, we have the resources. But in Rojava, they're fighting for their fucking lives over there already. And the idea of us having to like indefinitely burden them with lifetime prisoners, all of whom believe in like mass death, like it's insane. We're basically just pushing the problem onto them, you know? Yeah. Like, if you've signed up with ISIS, as far as I'm concerned, you've signed your death warrant. I really don't care what happens to you afterwards. No, I agree that we should not strip them of citizenship. We should take them back into our country so that they can be tried and spend the rest of their life in prison. Also, I think it would be a tremendous novelty to have trials in America for ISIS militants who moved out of America and then back here, you know? Some guy from Wisconsin talking about the need for a caliphate or whatever. I would love to hear that in court, please. It would be a delightful novelty. For Rojava, it's just a tedious feature of life, you know, every day for them.